For as great at recruiting as Mario Cristobal is, there's been one aspect in recruiting where coach has had a shocking lack of success. Can Miami break this curse?
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno. I'm a University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet and writer for allhurricanes.com. Thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We are available free wherever you get your podcasts, free on YouTube, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On today's episode, we are going to talk about Miami committed quarterback Luke Nickel getting a tremendous honor with the Elite 11 Finals invite and what that means for him in the program. Do want to break down some of Miami's top recruiting targets. We'll talk about whether or not Miami now has the best front seven in the ACC and maybe the country after adding Tyler Barron. I want to get our guest perspective on this Jaden Rashada, Billy Napier lawsuit. But we have to talk about this negative recruiting trend in just a second. By the way, every time the recruiting overlord joins us, he is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. So our recruiting overlord is with us. He's also my colleague at allhurricanes.com. Brian, I was shocked to find this out this week. And shout out to Gaby Urrutia from Inside the U for analyzing the last couple of recruiting cycles for Miami. You can't really pick on Mario Cristobal too much after a top 10 and a top 4 class in consecutive years. But, you know, there's this cliche, Brian, that recruiting analysts talk about when it comes to official visits. You either want to be first or last. In Miami's case, you do not want to be first. For the last 2 years, 2023 and 2024 recruiting cycles, Miami went 0 for on players who visited that first OV weekend. 0 for 8 the last couple of years, which is very odd. And because that's not really a heard of thing around the country, right, Brian?
Yeah, I don't know if I've heard any like schools that aren't good at recruiting, sure, but
Yeah.
Miami's conservatively a top 15 program on the recruiting trail. Conservatively.
Yeah.
Maybe top 5. How does that happen? That is one of the most bizarre stats I have heard in a long time.
Yeah, so last year, let me take a look at these. It was Cam Franklin, Draylon Miller, Tank Hawkins, James Nesta, Wyatt Gilmore. So yeah, 0 for 5. Let me pull up the previous cycle, 2023. I think they went 0 for 3 that year, which is, you know, not a whole lot of visits happening in that one anyway. Let's see. It was Olaus Alanen, the offensive lineman who went to Bama, Jaden Bonsu, the safety, went to Ohio State, Tamir Robinson, the edge, who went to Penn State. So yeah, 0 for 8 the last 2 weekends. Now, Brian, Miami's definitely, if you play the percentages, first official visit weekend this year, instead of 3 or 5 visitors, they've got 15 coming to campus for the first weekend, which is starting May 31st. So we're about a week away from that. Now, 3 of those are already Miami commits. So like you wouldn't count them, I guess. But I think having 3 Miami commits might help them preach the gospel to these other guys. So some of these other visitors, Jabori Antoine, who's a cornerback out of Louisiana, he is committed to LSU. I guess Miami's trying for a flip. You've got Zion Grady, the edge from Enterprise. We'll talk more about him with Brian. Eric Winters, the linebacker from Enterprise. Edge rusher Javion Campbell. Running back Byron Louis is going to be here. Edge rusher Hayden Lowe will be at Miami. Wide receiver Tyler Williams, who I know the staff really likes. Linebacker Ezekiel Marcelin. Cornerback Aiden Anding. Andrew Purcell, another Enterprise player. Shekai Mills-Knight, a running back. Jaden Wilkerson, and then the 3 Miami commits, TK Mew, Luka Gilbert, and Brock Schott will all be here. So out of that list, Brian, is maybe we can start with Shekai Mills-Knight, who's a running back I hear a lot about in terms of Miami. Do you think Miami breaks that 0 for first weekend streak this year?
If they don't, something has gone terribly, terribly wrong. That's just too many players. First off, Shekai's a good kid, power running back. His recruitment is blown up. I know Auburn really likes him, Michigan, several other schools. He would fit what Miami's looking for. They want to play downhill football, and that's a kid who's got options across the country now. He's 200 pounds. Miami, maybe they're the school for him. Who knows? But he's at a really good high school program. It's a boarding school in Southern Tennessee. I think that he would be a good fit. So he might be the guy. Maybe he's the first one that pops for the Canes.
Yeah, and Miami seems to be trending pretty strongly with Mills-Knight at running back. They already have a running back committed in Gerard Pringle, so they're looking for one more. Now, another running back visitor that I mentioned, Brian, a couple months ago seemed to be trending towards Miami. Seems to have been trending away, though, recently, is Byron Louis out of American Heritage, 5'11", 200 pounds. So he, again, fits that mold of being a powerful guy. I've seen Louis trending a few places, including Florida State lately, that do not include Miami. Do you think this one, for whatever reason, seems to be falling away from the Hurricanes?
Yeah, Florida State is the trendy pick. I don't know if that's the most accurate thing. He's a different kind of kid. He's going to look at things from a broader perspective. I think that's probably more day to day than like a overarching for a month or so, leaning to one school. I think he could still end up in Miami very easily. He's going to take his trips. Wisconsin wants him, etc. He's got a lot of visits he could take. This may play out a while.
What about Tyler Williams? I mentioned him, the 3-star receiver, 6'1", 195 out of Sumner High in Riverview, Florida. That is a name, and Miami's in the mix for a lot of receivers, Brian, because we hear about Jamie French, who has been Cristobal to Texas. I did want to bring that up. We hear about Dallas Wilson, who's committed to Oregon, but Miami's trying for the flip. We've talked a lot about Cortez Mills. Vernell Brown has Miami in his top 4, but Tyler Williams, that's a name I've consistently been hearing Miami really likes him. Have you had a chance to scout this player?
Yes, I know Tyler well. Good kid. He's really sprouted up over the last year. He went from roughly 6 foot to about 6'2", like 175, 180 to close to 200 pounds. He's a totally different prospect now. That's why his offer list includes the Alabamas of the world. So Miami's one of the schools. I don't know exactly what his visit list is going to be like. He's trying to formalize all that, but they're going to be in the top 3 or 4. They're going to get an OV. And maybe that's like, if he takes it that first weekend, maybe that's a sign that Miami is the team to be. Because when I talked to him a couple of weeks ago, like he wasn't sure exactly where he was going by any means, but Miami was a school that came up in a conversation.
Yeah. Okay, so you're in the Alabama area now. Now you travel a lot around the Southeast, but this is near your home base. I know you've been out to Enterprise High School quite a bit. Miami's got 3 players from Enterprise in Bama visiting. We know Miami's been doing well with recruits out of that state recently. The edge rusher Zion Grady, who I think is one of the real headliners there, 4-star player, 6'4", 235. Linebacker Eric Winters, 6'2", 200. And Andrew Purcell, who's listed as an athlete, 5'9", 185. Is he a DB, Brian? What can you tell me about those 3?
Purcell is the one that most people don't know as much about. He's a corner,
Yeah.
5'10"-ish, something like that. He's really athletic, kind of blossomed late last year. And the head coach there is trying to push him on some kids or on some schools, and they're being receptive. I know Auburn's interested, etc. Miami obviously is too if they're bringing him in for a visit. But the other 2 kids are no doubters. Winters is kind of a hybrid safety linebacker kid, and then Grady's an edge guy that everybody's recruiting. So I'm curious to see if Miami would take Purcell right now, like on the first visit. It's one thing to bring him in for visits, another accept a commitment. I don't know Purcell personally, but he's a really athletic kid. His film doesn't lie. He's just not the biggest guy. So what does Miami want to do with their cornerback board, and how do they want to move forward if he wanted to commit? That's something I'm curious about.
Yeah, well, Brian Smith is with us, the recruiting overlord, but I want to talk a little transfer portal coming back because, earlier this week, Miami got another important piece. Tyler Barron, former Tennessee Volunteers edge rusher, 6 sacks this past season. Hurricanes have a fearsome edge rotation. They've also solidified the interior of their defensive line. Miami have one of the best front sevens in the country, and how much of a worry could the defensive backfield be? We're also going to talk a little bit later on about our guy, Luke Nickel, Miami commit, getting that Elite 11 finals invite, one of 20 quarterbacks to do that. Fantastic. And I definitely want Brian's take on the Jaden Rashada lawsuit against Billy Napier. And I want to cover a certain angle that maybe isn't being talked about as much in all this. So, folks, you want to keep it locked right here. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Folks, when it comes to your financial future, you think you've done it all. You've saved, you've researched, you've invested all that you can. Now, you need to take those investments to the next level by using what every financial great uses, Yahoo Finance. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or you're looking for that extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data you need in one place. They are the #1 finance destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. Securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view of your wealth, including 401k and other investments. A comprehensive perspective is what sets apart great investors, and it's how Yahoo Finance ensures you have the insight to look at your wealth in its entirety. With a community of over 90 million users each month, their real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com. The #1 financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV Channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV Channels app. And it's a thrill to be part of this awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Alex Donno alongside our recruiting overlord, Brian Smith. Brian, Miami, it's funny. We go back to that when they were doing their transfer portal visits. I think Miami went 6 for 6, right? They had or 6 for 6 or 7 for 7. I think it was 6 for 6 because all 5 of the guys, Tyler Barron being the last one who made that first weekend visit, along with Damian Martinez and Sam Brown and Diani Hill, they all ended up committing. Simeon Barrow visited a few days later. He ends up committing. But now after adding the likes of Tyler Barron, who had success in the SEC the past 4 years, and adding Simeon Barrow, who had great success at Michigan State for the last couple of years, how do you look at Miami's front seven, Brian? Should they be maybe the best in the ACC, one of the best in the country?
Kind of hard to see how it wouldn't be. If you're going to have Ruben Bain back, that's obviously a great start. But I mean, they got Elijah Alston. It's coming in from Marshall. I really like him. You're adding Barron, and you've got some other young guys coming up. Like, they've got depth and they've got players that are proven as well. So they got length, they've got size. I think it's a top 10 group overall in just the D line nationally. And if you just talk about edge, because I know Ruben's going to move around, but I'm going to consider him an edge more than an inside guy. I'd say it's probably top 5. So now they can kind of dictate to teams without blitzing. They really came after teams last year. I think Miami will be able to rush 4, drop 7 a little more this season and still have at least similar results and probably get more picks too.
Yeah. What about like if you get that NASCAR package on the field in passing downs, right? Where you could have a 4-man defensive front on, 3rd and long, where you've got Elijah Alston and Tyler Barron on the edges, Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor inside. That unit's not going to be fun to go up against on those downs.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would be looking forward to that as an offensive tackle, especially a quarterback, because Ruben is the guy you don't know where he's going to line up, and all these other guys have already proven it. So Miami can stunt. They can move guys from play to play. They can play 3-man line. They can play 4-man line. I would say that they're going to have problems just with the edges. And, it's not like C.J. Clark or Marley Cook or somebody like that can't make plays too. But when they come off the field, you're just adding another pass rusher. You know what I mean? Like, that's just it's not even funny. And then you're still going to have guys like Basaint blitzing, Malinois blitzing. Yeah, that's going to be rough.
Yeah, a player I wanted to ask you about, because I know you covered him extensively a couple years ago when he was at Jones High School in Orlando. Malik Bryant, who's he's not someone that we necessarily mention as like being a potential starter, but he's a guy, he's moved from linebacker to edge. He's really been ascending. I thought Malik Bryant had a really good spring. And he's going to be, I think, an important depth guy on the edge. Now, he was really a natural, I should say, pass rusher coming out of high school. What did you see from him, even going back to his high school days in Orlando?
His frame, like we knew about him going like his sophomore year of high school. Everybody kind of knew he was going to be a Power 5 guy. Just didn't know where he was going to play. But at the high school level, as you know, Alex, not as many D linemen because of size, so they played him there. And I'd heard Miami was going to move him to linebacker, and I'm like, well, we'll see. But he's playing defensive line in high school. We'll see how that goes. And now he's already back to D line. He fits it. His mentality is that way. He plays downhill. He's a kid that is just naturally big in his upper body. He's really strong for his size. I think he's a strong side end or a weak side end. It just depends on the situation because he has unusual strength for a kid his size. Like when he puts his hands on a 300-pound guy, he can still move him. So now it's just about technique and understanding things. I would not be surprised at all if he played a lot because he's a big athletic kid with length. So yeah, Miami's got another guy in the queue, if you will. Like, well, we take one guy off the field, we just put another guy in. That's how you win big, is having a lot of D linemen, and Miami's in that spot.
I would love to get Brian Smith's perspective on the Jaden Rashada lawsuit. Rashada he's suing Billy Napier, head coach of the Florida Gators, for fraud, right? And there's a couple of other defendants there, including Hugh Hathcock, who's the big-time Gator booster. And now, listen, I obviously we all know with NIL, big-time money gets offered, and these NIL deals, a lot of people think, oh, it's getting out of control. But okay, here's the part that this is not about offering money. The problem here is the allegation that you're offering money apparently with no intention to actually pay it. And then the alleged Billy Napier involvement was, when Rashada rightfully got cold feet right before National Signing Day, like, hey, are they actually going to pay me anything? I don't want to sign my national letter of intent. That's when allegedly Billy Napier called him and said, don't worry, you're going to get your money, sign with us. And then Rashada's accusation is they were just telling me whatever they needed to tell me to get me to commit with no intention of actually fulfilling this NIL deal. So that's where the fraud comes in. And that, to me, Brian, I do not have an issue with players getting paid. I think they deserve it. I'm glad NIL is here. I'm glad revenue sharing is coming. I think players deserve this. But obviously, when you're allegedly committing fraud, that is a problem. So I would ask you don't have to name any names, but you cover hundreds of high school recruits around the country. Is it a common or semi-common thing to get offers, and then those offers end up getting yanked and fraud is committed? Like, is that something that happens far beyond Jaden Rashada?
Most of this stuff is done behind closed doors because until recently, let's be honest, the NIL stuff has been used as an inducement by everyone.
Yeah, sure.
And it's illegal, etc. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. So when kids would get mad if they didn't get money, they'd be turning themselves in. So it was an awkward situation.
Yeah.
Now it's starting to be different, but like I know of several cases, for what I'm told, where a guy got hurt and wasn't playing at a school. They weren't hurt. They were irritated over the whole NIL situation at that school. It's happened a bunch. But again, this is before like the NCAA's kind of just backed off. They're as non-committal on what they're going to do with NIL as anything I've ever seen. It's bizarre. Yeah. But I think that's why Rashad is bringing this up, and he waited to when he did. So that's just part of it. Now, with that, this also opens up other things. If he gets any money for whatever settlement or whatever, it's going to open doors on how the schools act. There's going to be a lot tighter contracts. And if you leave after like you go to a school, Miami or whatever, and you transfer, there's going to be buyouts. It's going to be very NFL-like. It's not going to just be helping the player. This is going to help schools probably as much, if not more. But the whole Napier thing is the part in particular that's unique. You're going to see coaches just completely take themselves out. If he gets sued and loses, take themselves out of the recruitment. Like they're not going to deal with it. It's a problem.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's a bad precedent, even if he did that, because then coaches like, how do you do this? It's really awkward.
I kind of feel like if anything, Florida may end up kind of benefiting from this, Brian, because I don't know how high they are on Billy Napier anyway. And if they can make him the sacrificial lamb and say, hey, look, we're going to fire him with cause. right? Not have to pay that buyout. That might be their way of a
100%.
win-win. You get rid of the problem and you don't have to pay for it.
I think they'll go into the season. If Billy does better than expected, they'll back him. If he doesn't, they'll use it
Right.
for like it's
Right.
they can play the card on either side of the table. That I agree with Alex, and like their schedule for anybody that doesn't know, besides playing Miami that begins is the hardest in the country. They
Yeah.
still have some holes in their roster, some things to prove. So Billy is in a tough spot. I cannot imagine what it's like walking around in his living room right now.
I can't. I'd love to be a fly on the wall, though. A huge honor for one of Miami's most important class of 2025 commits. We talk about the need for blue chip quarterbacks. Luke Nickel is a blue chip quarterback, and he's on his way to the Elite 11 finals. You want to keep it locked right here on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. And I already know you're keeping it locked to FanDuel. Big win for the Florida Panthers last night. Panthers money line has been carrying me through these NHL playoffs. And if you're a big Miami football fan, there are futures bets to be made at FanDuel. Miami over under 9.5 wins. Miami plus 450 to win the ACC coming up. You want to lock these in at America's #1 sportsbook. And yes, it is winner take all time in the NBA and NHL. FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and so much more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're available free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And if you want to take your everydayer experience to the next level, sign up to become a Locked On Canes insider. I include the link in the show description below. Click that link. Try it free for 14 days. You get text messages directly from my phone to yours with show updates, breaking news, recruiting scoops, transfer portal scoops, text message directly from my phone to yours. Try it free for 2 weeks. Then if you like it, you can opt in for $4.99 a month. Become a Locked On Canes insider. Brian Smith is with us here. He's my colleague at allhurricanes.com. He's the recruiting overlord here on the Locked On Network. So Brian, Luke Nickel is headed to the Elite 11 finals. Miami has had some of these guys in recent years. A couple years ago, Miami had Emory Williams and Jaden Rashada, because he was actually committed to Miami at that time. Jakari Brown was at Elite 11 finals actually a few years back. But with Luke Nickel, how does he stack up with some of the other top quarterbacks in the country coming out of high school?
I thought it was pretty interesting because I was looking at Elite 11's list, and it's a good year for quarterbacks nationally, but it's not necessarily like just one guy is just definitely better than everybody. Who wins the Elite 11, who finishes top 5 is up for grabs. It'll be a good group. Luke is a guy, though, that's been trained at Milton High School. It's just on the north edge of Atlanta, big-time program. They just won state. He's a little more advanced, technically, than some of the other guys that I've seen. And the only thing that he needs to do is just keep working his craft and getting stronger and faster. So he's 6'2", 210 pounds. He's a guy that can move around. He can throw on the run. I think he'll do really well at the Elite 11. They try to put you in uncomfortable situations, pass rush scenarios, time, how quickly you can get rid of the ball, rolling left with your right-hand quarterback. And he's a guy that's been through all that. He's been pressured by Georgia kids for the last 3 years, so that's part of it. But he's also a guy that just loves the competition. He's, at the Elite 11 I saw him at this year, he had a slow start. He had one little grouping where he didn't play well, and I was standing over there talking to his dad, and Luke came over and got some Gatorade. And he walked by, and he bumped me, and I can't repeat what he said, but he was very angry at himself. I'll just let your mind wander about how his performance was. Use your mind, figure that out. He's very competitive. So that's the other thing that drives him. I think he'll finish somewhere in the top 10, but after that, it's hard to say. So Miami's getting another really good quarterback. How that quarterback battle plays out over the next few years is up to Luke and everybody else. But it's a player that can definitely play at the University of Miami.
Honestly, like Miami's lack of consistent success recruiting the quarterback position, it's pretty astounding for the better part of the last 20 years, Brian. And obviously, like Cam Ward coming in as a transfer, I think can be awesome this year, right? And hopefully he can set the tone for quarterback play. De'Ara King had success his first season as a transfer here. He was injured after that, and Tyler Van Dyke was recruited organically, had some flashes, but obviously had the inconsistency and turnover issues. And, Malik Rozier had some success, is not a blue chip quarterback. Brad Kaya did have some success down here, but there's just been a lot of swings and misses when it comes to recruiting quarterbacks. And is that something Mario Cristobal and his staff can change? Because we still don't necessarily see Miami consistently in it for like blue chip quarterbacks. I believe Luke Nickel is becoming a blue chip quarterback, but Miami hasn't been consistently involved with a lot of those guys in recent years. Can they change that?
It's bizarre. Some of the teams that get them, they don't necessarily go to programs that are always great. Sometimes it's, I grew up rooting for a school. It's random. That's recruiting in general.
Yeah, it's true.
But Shannon Dawson is looking for fits. And I know he flat out really likes Luke Nickel. And there's some other guys too. He wants guys that fit his system, and he wants guys that have upside. So that's what they took last year. That's what they're taking again this year. And I don't think there's anything wrong with where they're at now, but looking back at some of the other guys, you're right. It is bizarre how Miami missed on so many guys, or they were just average, didn't seem to get a whole lot better, whatever it was. I'm not sure what it stems from, because when I was growing up, Miami always had a good quarterback.
Yeah,
they always did. So I think development is probably the biggest thing. It's not who you sign, it's who you develop. Yeah. Quarterback and O-line are the two biggest development spots, because there's a lot of guys that are similar. Then it's, how much do you work? Do you take your training and, strength and conditioning, all that stuff. That's stuff you can't evaluate because it's after they sign, and quarterback is the most important with that. So I don't know, but I think Miami's kind of due to hit on a high school kid. I mean, when was the last time Miami hit on a high school quarterback that was just flat out good? State of Miami went, when was the last one?
I mean, so some would say Kaya, some would say he doesn't fit that category. I mean, Brad Kaya was pretty good here.
Yeah, he was pretty good.
He get drafted. He got drafted in the 6th round, but he did. But and then you're right about the misses. Like, Jake Garcia, that was a blue chip guy coming out of high school, and I don't even know if that was Miami's fault that he didn't pan out, because it's not like he's panned out since leaving Miami either. And yeah, I mean, if you want to go way back, Kyle Wright was the number 1 recruit in the country back in 2003. And that was, there were a lot of factors there, but that he was a bust at Miami. So yeah, it's been a long time.
That's one of those things.
Ken Dorsey.
Dorsey was great, obviously. It's just really hard sometimes to predict. I don't think a lot of people saw Ken Dorsey being a 3-year starter at Miami. And he actually started at the end of his freshman year, if I remember right.
Yeah, that's right.
So quarterback is about development, man. We can talk about 5-star kids, but if you look at the 5-star quarterbacks over the last 10 years, half or more are still busts. It's the hardest position to evaluate, no doubt.
No doubt. Well, great stuff as always by Brian Smith. You want to make sure you follow him on X at FBScout_Florida. Check out his work at allhurricanes.com. Make sure you follow us at Locked On Canes. You follow us, we will follow you back on X, and we're going to have a lot of shows tomorrow. I say a lot because I think we're going to be interviewing some Miami Hurricanes players tomorrow, courtesy of Canes Connection. So you guys want to make sure you stay tuned for that on another episode of Locked On Canes. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.